All right, today we are talking lesson 1 before giving care and checking an injured or ill person. So we'll just go straight into it. Recognizing and responding to an emergency. All right, so in an emergency, there are 4 actions you can take to make a difference in the outcome for an injured or ill person. So, first one, you want to recognize that an emergency exists. You're going to decide to take action, activate the emergency medical services EMS system, which we'll talk about a lot, and then give care consistent with your knowledge and training until EMS personnel arrive and take over. All right, so now we're going to watch some videos to explain this further. All right, and now we'll see what that looks like for a child. It's going to be a little bit different. All right, the first secret word is going to be avocado. So write that down if you are listening. Okay, recognizing and responding to an emergency. So some things we want to think about from the video. What alerted bystanders to the fact that an emergency was occurring? What other observations might signal an emergency? And what were some of the bystander roles depicted in those videos? So some things that you can think about. So unusual noises, sights, odors, appearances, or behaviors are oftentimes first signs of an emergency. Bystander roles in an emergency can be a couple different things, including giving first aid, calling 911, getting the emergency kit, getting the AED, first aid kit, all of that type of stuff. All right, so why might someone be hesitant to respond to an emergency? All right, so some things that might stop somebody from intervening could be panicking, being uncertain that an emergency actually exists, fear of doing something wrong or causing further harm, assuming that the situation is already under control, squeamishness relating to sights, sounds, and smells like blood and vomit, fear of catching a disease, and fear of being sued. So, this training will give participants the confidence, knowledge, and skills to respond appropriately in an emergency if you should have any of these fears that we just talked about. Lay responders are rarely sued for helping in an emergency. Good Samaritan laws help protect people who are voluntarily giving care in good faith without accepting anything in return. Taking steps such as obtaining the person's consent before giving care according to one's level of training, and continuing to give care until EMS personnel arrives to protect lay responders from any liability as a result of getting involved. The risk of catching a disease when giving first aid care is very low, but using PPE such as latex-free disposable gloves and breathing barriers reduces the risk even further. So in a first aid situation, first we must decide to take action. But let's think about some things that could be life-threatening conditions. Could be someone who is unresponsive, someone who has an altered level of consciousness and confusion, breathing problems, severe external bleeding, signs and symptoms of a medical condition such as a heart attack or stroke, severe burns, suspected or obvious injuries to the head, neck, or spine, obvious broken bone, poisoning, or seizures. So whenever possible, send someone else to make the call while you stay with the person and begin giving care. All right, so we need to think about what information should the person who makes the call be prepared to give the dispatcher. Main thing is the location of the emergency, so you want to know the address or something nearby to help tell them where you are. The nature of the emergency, so whether police, fire, or medical assistance is needed. The telephone number of the phone being used, a description of what happened, the number of injured or ill people, and what, if any, help has been given so far and by whom. The caller should stay on the phone until the dispatcher says it's all right to hang up. The dispatcher may need additional information, and many dispatchers are also trained to give instructions for care over the phone. All right, so giving care until EMS takes over. So before giving care, you must obtain consent. So you're going to tell the person who you are, what type and level of training you have, what you think is wrong, and what you plan to do. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so you must obtain consent from a minor's parent or guardian if present. Consent is always implied if the person is unresponsive, confused, or mentally impaired, and a minor with a life-threatening condition and parent or guardian is not present. If a person who is awake and alert does not give consent, do not give care. Call EMS personnel, but if you believe the person has a life-threatening condition and needs care. So now we're going to talk about check, call, and care. All right, so check, call, care. Before rushing to help, size up the scene and form your initial impression. Use your senses to gather information that will help you determine whether the scene is safe to enter, what happened to cause the emergency, how many people are involved, and what condition the person is in. Also, whether anyone else is there available to help. As your part of the scene size up, form your initial impression about what is wrong with the person. So, do they appear ill? Any injuries? Are they moving or motionless? Does the person have any signs of life-threatening illness or injury? Based on your scene size up and initial impression, you may need to call 911, obtain equipment such as the AED and the first aid kit, and provide immediate care for severe life-threatening bleeding. All right, so this is an activity we would do if we were in person and in class. So you'd check out these pictures, try to see, do we think anything's wrong here? Main things would be that spill, the smoke coming out there. This one, you kind of have a sharp object there. We can see some external bleeding. And this one, kind of a fun one to talk about. We don't really know what's going on. So you can use your imagination there to try to form your own opinion. All right, so call first or care first. So if you're alone and there's no one to send or call for help, you may need to decide whether you should call first or care first. Call first situations are likely to be cardiac arrest, which we'll talk about in later lessons. And care first situations include breathing emergencies and life-threatening bleeding. So you should call first for any person about 12 years old or older who is unresponsive, a child or infant who you saw suddenly collapse, and an unresponsive child or infant who is known to have heart problems. All right, these are the ones you're going to want to call first for. The ones you want to care first for is an unresponsive infant or child younger than 12 years who you didn't see collapse, someone who is choking, a person who is experiencing a severe allergic reaction and has an epinephrine auto-injector, or a person who has life-threatening bleeding. Okay, those ones you're going to want to care first before you run to make the call. So how do you lower the risk for infection? You want to use PPE. It can help you lower the risk of transmitting an infectious disease when you're giving care. Latex-free disposable gloves and CPR breathing kits are an awesome resource there. So gloves, breathing barriers, or use both. As we all know, we can also use face masks. And that is the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2.